Good morning, and welcome to the Morning Report. The Morning Report is a collection of fightbackmedia.com, 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 and fightbackmediatv.com. My name is Willie Lawson. I think that this whole, and we've been talking about this for a while, on and off, that this entire transgender ideology um, is not the entire story that we see on TV and that we hear in the news. We hear and see a lot about Florida and this, and what we don't understand is behind all of this are people or individuals, and they all have stories, and the narrative that gets pushed, and we talked about this before, is one of how all of this is a positive thing. Well, not everything is positive, and we've said this for a long time. Aspirin, which is a pretty safe drug, is not safe for everybody.
That's right.
And those stories aren't being told. So I found, I don't know how, I don't know. I think it was on Twitter when it used to be called Twitter. Now it's called X. I'm not sure why that is,
I don't
Elon.
know either. I
You're gonna
know.
have
Why
to
did
go.
he do that?
I don't know, because you know what? Because he can. And there are people in the world who do stuff. Why? Because they can.
Yeah.
That's what he's. And I think I've found this group called Transition. I can't speak today. Transition Justice, because there are people, and you sort of hear some of their stories sometime on like TikTok and Instagram, that have been damaged
Yes.
by the medical industry, and they're basically churning these people into being lifetime patients,
Yes.
and those stories aren't being told,
Right.
and I think that is on purpose. And
Oh,
so,
absolutely. There's a
well,
media blackout on it.
yeah, so we found someone who wants to who agreed to come on the show and speak with us, from
Transition justice.
yeah, that's a tough thing for me to say, Martha. Martha, thank you ever so much for coming on. Tell us about the organization a little bit, and we'll get into a few specifics.
Sure. So, Transition Justice is a project of Partners for Ethical Care. Partners for Ethical Care is a nonprofit, secular. We're not affiliated with any religion, we're nonpartisan. We are just a group of professionals and parents who were alarmed at the number of children and vulnerable young adults who all of a sudden were were claiming to be born in the wrong body and were being told they needed to change their quote gender, even though there nobody really knows what gender means. There's It's not a scientific definition at all, and it's circular. So this idea of changing your gender is we believe, and we've seen that it's a very new idea. It's only been percolating the last decade or so. Before that, it was people were called transsexuals who wanted to change their sex, but of course you can't change your sex. It's impossible. Our sex is dictated by our chromosomes, so there's no way someone can change their sex. So the medical industry had to invent new terms for new procedures that would make them money. And unfortunately, the victims of this are the very young and very vulnerable. So we formed our organization because we've seen so many people who have suffered terrible damage because of this. We've even had some children who, and mostly once they became young adults and realized what happened, many children have died by suicide, or many the children of parents we know have died by suicide once they realized what they had done to themselves, or what someone else did to them. They didn't do it. They just went seeking help and were sold a bill of goods. So we formed this organization 3 years ago, and since that time, our organization is for three things: to bring awareness to this issue, because most mainstream media pretends like it's just rainbows and butterflies to change your gender. Also to help with legislative efforts to stop this kind of thing, at least for the very young, but more for everybody, because frankly, it doesn't work. And then third is we want to have lawyers to bring lawsuits against these doctors, because we know that in the United States, that's the only way we'll ever stop anything is with litigation.
How is it how is it possible, Martha, that we have moved um, from understanding as settled science? And we hear that phrase so often around basically everything,
Yes.
that this settled science of XX and XY chromosomes is somehow just being ignored by the medical profession. That there aren't people coming out saying, stop, 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 stop. This is not possible.
Yeah.
That no matter what you do to the exterior of your body, you can have scales attached to your face. You
Yeah.
will not become a lizard.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And the crazy thing is, there are people who are saying that, and there's a lot of them. There are many doctors who are talking about this. There's new medical organizations that have formed to fight back against these mainstream organizations that are really lobby groups for the medical profession that's making money. So you have the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Medical Association. Most physicians who belong to these groups, first of all, those groups are not all physicians and they don't represent all physicians. But even those who are members of those groups do not agree with all this. It's okay to do cosmetic surgery on children and very young mentally ill adults, uh, just for to change the gender appearance, or whatever you want to call it. Most of them don't agree, but the problem is that the leadership of those organizations has been hijacked by activists and by people who are making a lot of money from this. And the rest of the organization, the doctors just don't pay attention. They're busy, they have other things to do. They're not the ones interested in this. The ones making money from it are interested. But in addition, these groups were never set up for the benefit of the patient. They're set up for the benefit of the doctors. So these groups are just lobby groups that they don't represent. They don't have the best interests of patients at heart, frankly. And I came from a medical family. I know this. My grandfather, my father, my brother, and my niece are all physicians. This has been, as far as I mean, my whole life I've been part of the medical establishment, but physicians we know do not understand this and they do not agree with it.
So you're saying that a lot of physicians are as bewildered as the rest of us,
Yes.
how these narratives are being pushed, and being accepted,
Yeah.
by parents who, seemingly normal parents who have come on, and we see on social media. Unfortunately, I spend way too much time on social media, Mark. I really do. I do. I do. Now, so when Lent comes around next year, yeah, because I spent way too much time on social media. But we'll come out and say things like their 6 and 7 year olds are
Oh,
transgender. I'm like,
yeah.
they're 6.
Yeah.
They don't even go to the bathroom by themselves in the mall.
Pretty
How could
much. Yeah.
how could they
Yeah.
decide that they're transgender? Because a minute ago I saw your 6 year old who thought he was a dinosaur.
Exactly. And there's something but there is something wrong with some of these parents. Some parents are being led down a path by physicians. So in some cases, especially before the last few years, many patients were talked into these kind of treatments for their kids by doctors. But now, because you couldn't find anything to the contrary on the internet at all. I mean, there was nothing, a few years ago about the huge explosion of kids and about children being affirmed by physicians in one appointment. There was nothing about that. But now there's organizations like ours who have made this very public and who have talked about it. And there's organizations of doctors such as Do No Harm Medicine. There's the Society for Evidence-Based Gender Medicine. So these are groups that have sprung up to counter this narrative by the profiteering doctors. And they're saying, look, this is not right. So anybody who's doing this to their child now with the information that's out there is doing so because, in my opinion, I mean, I hate to say this, but I think they want attention. I think it's an attention seeking, social credit seeking activity. It's the trendy new thing to do.
It most certainly, and it most certainly is. And how, and I see that your second point is legislation, because now a lot of state governments, there are, and thank you for the information that you sent me. I appreciate that. There are about 18 states around the country
Mhm.
that passed legislation to stop gender affirming care, especially for youngsters. Because I'm old, I still use words like youngster and pupil
Yeah,
instead of students and kids. But how about the states that are going the other direction, that
yeah,
are now in cahoots
right.
with all the people that we're talking about, all the,
Mhm.
you know, fighting for gender, affirming the 7-year-old's gender, but he's 7.
Yeah,
Um, or
exactly.
and I spent 15 years of my life in the public school system, and I know I talk about that like I was in jail. I wasn't, you know, yeah, I was 15 years in the system. And I taught middle school for a while. And what I learned about middle school is that nobody, not even your best kids in middle school, don't have a clue as to what's going on with themselves. They just don't have a clue.
Exactly.
Your best
Exactly.
kids don't.
Right. And that's
So
okay. They're children.
that's exactly right. And they all, for the most part, grow out of it.
Yes.
They learn out of it, they grow out of it, they develop out of it, they mature out of it.
Hmm.
So how do you take the word of a 13-year-old that says, I feel like I was born in the wrong body?
Yeah.
I remember being 13. I felt like I was born on the wrong planet.
Yes. Isn't that true?
I felt like
Did
I was,
anybody feel comfortable with their body when they were 13?
I didn't feel comfortable with anything at 13
No,
year old.
absolutely not.
So I don't, this whole thing just blows my mind. All right.
Yeah, it's monetizing children's normal insecurities, really.
And that's my next point. How much money? Because the phrase, if you want to know why something weird is going on, they tell you to do what?
Follow the money.
Every single time.
Yeah.
Every single time. How much money is being made?
You know, there are so many estimates about this. We know, think I saw something like 2 years ago when or three, when we first started Partners for Ethical Care, saying that the gender industry was on track that year to be like I think a $5 billion industry. I don't know if anybody can possibly figure out how much is being made, because you have pharmaceutical companies making a ton of money. You have medical device companies like Stryker, which the head of Stryker medical device company has donated a ton of money to transgender issues. Why do you think that is? Well, because every time you go in a hospital, you see the bed the person's laying on. It says Stryker on the side. He wants more people in hospitals. He wants more and more and more people to be dependent on medical devices for the rest of their lives. And that's exactly what's happening. And when you look at there's so many parts of the industry that people don't even know. There's pornography that is specifically marketed at kids to try to convince them that they're in the wrong body. A huge part of anime, a lot of anime, there's specific kinds of anime porn directed to boys and others directed to girls that makes them feel that this is what's going to make them happy. There's also the sex toy industry. It used to be, this small, sort of dark thing that was really geared towards adults. Now it's all kinds of, brightly colored new things that are marketed at children, and Amazon sells them to kids. It's a totally new industry. And in some places, they even partner with children's hospitals to distribute these sex toys. Talk about pedophilia. What is wrong with anybody who would promote sex toys to children? It's disgusting. But that's a whole new part of the industry that isn't even written about very much. You also, Willie, we don't know one thing that one of our members is Alex, the gender mapper. She has a website called gendermapper.com where she asks people to give their experiences. It's a map of the whole world, and it shows you gender clinics, in particular children gender clinics all over the world. And she asked people, give me your summary of what happened if you've ever gone there, if you took your child there thinking, my child claims this, all of a sudden that they have a different gender, we need to see what's going on. So they take them to the gender clinic thinking that they're going to help sort it out. And instead, the gender clinic, as a rule, we have not heard of one single person, no matter how mentally ill the child was, um, that turned the child away. Every single one says, yes, we need to put your child on hormones, and then, we'll refer them for a mastectomy. So in the gender map, she has people's testimony about what happened when they went to these gender clinics, or some people call them anonymously and say, will you operate on a 15-year-old boy? Will you castrate him? Yes, they will. Or if they don't, they'll find you somebody who does. And this is a huge part of the industry. They're everywhere. But the gender mapper has talked about the even like what happens to the tissue when they do mastectomies on all these young girls, when they do castrations and remove, sometimes they remove penile tissue, sometimes they split it, as gruesome as that sounds, and to turn it into what looks like a girl's genitalia. But when they remove the testicles, the breasts, where does the tissue go? Who's where is it? I mean, there has to be a ton of it out there. Is somebody buying this? Are they doing some kind of experiments with this genetic information? I mean, there's so many parts of this industry that we don't even know, who is getting all this. Our gender mapper at one point was trying to find out, and there was a French company that was buying some of the tissue. But we never did, we just haven't had time, honestly, and the resource to investigate all this. But we're just a small group of people, and it's mind-boggling when you think of
Wow.
how all these different facets of this organization.
That is incredible, and it seems like there's so many tentacles
Yes.
from all of this that it seems like it's going to be an incredible effort, and will require as many people as possible to start
Hmm.
asking as many questions as they possibly can. But we live in a time where if you're asking questions that are against the mainstream,
Yeah.
it's hard to get a footing, because most of the questions get asked on social media, and social media is, well, we've already gone through that. We went for 2.5 years of you can't ask a question.
Right.
You just can't, because you don't want to.
Yeah. People we know get booted off social media all the time
Mhm.
just because they ask a question. It's called hateful speech or something. It's like, really? We just want to know, this is really, in my opinion, this is discrimination and conversion therapy of vulnerable and often children who would be gay when they grow up. So I've been talking to, since we started the Transition Justice Project a little over a year ago, I've talked to so many young men who were just effeminate boys. They were effeminate from the beginning, and probably, and they're gay now that they're adults, but somebody told them, well, you should really be a girl because you're too effeminate. How regressive is that? That all of a sudden there's something wrong with effeminate boys or girls, tomboys, girls who like cars, so they're converting these kids. And in fact, we have a lawyer in San Francisco who's bringing a lawsuit on this basis, that this is a violation of civil rights and human rights, because you're taking children or very young adults. Often it's college kids. Those are the most vulnerable of all, because they don't have their parents to protect them anymore. And predators are on every college campus with this kind of, the school insurance covers it. So these kids are homesick, especially during the pandemic when they were alone, nobody was nearby. There was all these kids who during that time, especially, were on their computer all day and found all this bizarre, pornography that was specifically targeted And often it's targeted to autistic and kids on the spectrum or who have extremely high IQ, because those are the most vulnerable to this ideology.
Well, it's interesting that you said that effeminate boys are being targeted,
Yeah.
and at the same time, this culture is attacking boys who are not effeminate, who are
Yes.
because now we have this toxic masculinity.
Yes.
We have
Yes.
these boys, and I teach saxophone, flute, and clarinet, and so I have some young boys who are 110% boys.
Yeah.
They're like bowling balls through life. They just
Right.
are. And
Yeah.
that sort of masculinity is also being targeted.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
so all of it is so confusing and
Yeah.
so angering and maddening. So
Hmm.
and I have to wonder aloud, and I don't know. We're gonna put this video up on YouTube, and we hope it stays there. I had a video taken down just that I did 2 years ago about some COVID numbers
Yeah.
that now the CDC backs,
Exactly.
and that video was taken down 2 days ago.
Oh my gosh.
2 days ago it was taken down. And I watched it, and I went, and now all the things I mentioned in the video, it wasn't crazy. I wasn't talking about doing anything nuts. I wasn't talking about drinking bleach or anything crazy. I was just reading numbers
Yeah.
that they published, that I don't publish, that they published, and that was taken
Exactly.
down for medical misinformation. And now the CDC is saying exactly what I said 2 years ago.
Right.
And 2 days ago, that video was taken down. So it's
That's
hard.
insane.
It Yes. So it's really tough to push back against this Leviathan,
Yeah.
frankly, that has developed and now has momentum.
Yes.
How can I have two how questions? How can the average person who's just sitting at home going, or on their computer or right now on your phone, because most of y'all watch this show on your phone. Be careful of your neck. Watch it on your phone. How can these people have any influence in what's going on? Because it's obvious to me, I don't know anyway, I don't know anybody else, we've got to do something to push back this narrative, or at least chop it into chunks so it can be attacked. I know
Yeah.
that's a terribly toxic masculine way to put it. I understand. I understand. And I'll just get my broadsword out. There we go. and and start chopping off tentacles. But that's what seems there's so many pieces to it.
Yeah.
How does the average person um, push back against the narrative in their average world?
Well, I think there's so many ways you can do it. You can get involved in legislation if there's any in your state by writing, of course, to your congressman or senator. You can look at you, and I think there needs to be national legislation, frankly, in order to do that. I'm not partisan, but most likely this has become a partisan issue. So most likely the only way this will get turned around is if Republicans take control of the Senate. And I'm not saying I'm not a Republican, but I'm saying when you try to talk to Democrats about it, they shut you down. They just shut you down, just like with the COVID thing. It's all because the pharmaceutical companies really have control over the media and over most governors in the country. So almost every governor pushed back against this kind of legislation, even in the reddest of states, because most of them get money from the pharmaceutical industry, from the hospitals, and they all want that money. So, they finally, some of them were forced to go along with this, with the legislation because they were about to lose their primary races. So, you have to get involved. Another way you can get involved is stop watching the media that you feel like is lying to you.
Just watch me.
Yeah, and also, well, there's one new network, News Nation, that is that is starting to be a competitor to CNN and Fox and those, and their stance is to be non-biased and be neutral. So they have done a little bit of reporting on detransitioners and on this issue. And the problem is, they get pushed back too. So if you write to them and say, we want to see more about this, they'll start putting out some more information, because that's the thing. The companies like Fox and ABC and CNN and those, they're they've been given money by the pharmaceutical industry, and that's why during COVID it was so alarmist the whole time, and nobody was telling you the truth. So even since, yeah, you and
I was.
Tucker Carlson and a
I
few
was.
others, yeah, and since Fox got rid of Tucker Carlson, now even Fox doesn't have many people. I mean, Laura Ingraham is good, but anybody else, they're not even going to talk about what's going on. So, but I think News Nation will. I think they really do strive to be balanced. So that is one TV network that you can write to and you say, I wish you would cover this issue. We have Chris Cuomo on that show now.
Oh,
And Chris is liberal, but then they have other people who are not. And, even Chris Cuomo will start to take, he'll start to look at it differently. And if you say, Chris, I want to see more on your show about this, maybe he'll put it on there. Maybe he'll talk about these issues more. So we have to stop watching and listening to these other sources that don't give us unbiased news.
yeah, yeah, and you're absolutely right. But we got some serious. I'm still getting pushback from COVID, which is crazy.
Yeah,
Like, wait a minute, I'm just saying what you said.
right.
Um, I tell people at the beginning of every video I did on COVID, I was like, I can't tell you what to do. I won't tell you what to do. I'm not a
No.
doctor. I don't play one on YouTube. I can't tell you what to do. I can tell you what I did, but I can't tell you what to do. I can't tell you what medicines to take because I don't know. But it didn't matter. It
Yeah.
didn't matter. Anything that was anti whatever the mainstream narrative was shut down. And the
Yes.
very same thing I think is happening on this issue too.
Yeah. And coincidentally, they're both owned by the pharmacy companies. I mean, the whole thing is the medical industry that was led by Fauci, who he was in bed with all the pharmaceutical manufacturers. You had a
And
revolving door.
and Dr. Burks is now working for
Mhm. Oh, yeah.
one of the largest pharmaceutical
Oh,
companies.
yeah. Because she was in the thick of it too. And then they're all also the pharmaceutical companies basically run the medical schools now. So they preach whatever the pharmaceutical companies tell them. So doctors aren't even learning real science anymore. They're being told that there's 12 genders or more at some medical schools. It's insane.
It's absolutely awful. It's absolutely awful. So on my other how can my viewers and myself, how can we help trans
Transition justice.
thank you.
Oh,
I
yeah.
need
Well,
coffee because I can't say that word.
yeah, please go to our website, Transition Justice. Let's see, I think, yes, transitionjustice.com
.org.
or .org, and partnersforethicalcare.com, which runs the project. Both of those, we take donations on those, and your donations, especially if it goes right directly to Transition Justice, will go to pay legal expenses for these kids, because the problem is a lot of them, we have to try very novel theories for their lawsuits, because most of the time, the medical industry has done such a good job at getting statutes of limitation very short. So they're 2.5 years, 3 years maximum in most states. So these kids, the first year or two after they have something done, they're like, well, I'm supposed to be feeling better, and I don't feel better yet, and this is really painful. And then the doctor tells them, well, don't worry, it just takes time. You'll start to feel better, and they keep getting strung along, and then the statute of limitations is up and they can't sue their doctor. So right now, what we've
Evil.
had to do is come in with different kinds of theories besides medical malpractice in different states. And even, like I said, we have a lawyer in San Francisco who's doing human rights cases basically. And there, she's doing this for free, and she has to pay expenses. She has to have experts, and we don't have any way to pay these people. I mean, a lot of these young people can't even work. They're disabled now after what's been done to them. And it's not fair. I mean, they have to live the rest of their lives without working genitalia. And that's really, really a horrible thing to have done to somebody who's very young, especially,
And
even if
especially
you're older.
like in the spot that you guys will see after we're done here, there was a person who was really her name. I guess her name is Shape.
Shapeshifter. Yeah.
And and
He was a guy, a feminine boy. Yeah,
basically traded in a perfectly working set of genitalia
right.
for nothing, for
Exactly.
absolutely nothing that works,
Yeah.
and doesn't feel any better. Did
Oh no.
worse, and who's in
Yeah.
constant pain. So I think part of what we're going to do is we're going to continue to tell the story, because if we don't tell the stories, people won't know.
That's the thing. And that's the most important thing people can do is tell the stories and recommend websites like ours, Partners for Ethical Care. There's lots of other websites. There's Wolf, the Women's Liberation Front, that often talks about these issues because it also puts women in danger because you have a lot of men who, claim a transgender identity. Who knows whether that they even have that feeling or not, but they want to be in women's prisons, women's bathrooms, women's dressing rooms, and that puts women at risk.
And
So,
we've seen cases where there are prisoners who get transferred to women's institutions
yes,
who rape women and make them pregnant while they're in jail.
yes, exactly. And the women in those places are living in fear,
Yes, it's
but
bad
their
enough,
stories are not told.
to be in jail. First of all, it's bad enough that you're in jail,
Yeah,
and now you're in jail with
with a rapist
with a
often.
rapist.
Hmm.
It's
Yeah,
insane.
it's
It's awful.
disgusting.
It's awful.
But yeah, you'll see plenty of websites that do discuss this. There's groups like the Mom Army, there's Moms for Liberty, there's many other groups that are trying to get education around this issue. So, I mean, there's also Transgender Trend was the first group in the UK that really discussed all this. So if you go to any of these websites, you'll find a lot of information, and and ways that you can support what
Cool.
the pushback against all this.
We will do that, and we will continue that. Martha, thank you ever so much
Sure.
for spending a little time with us here on the Morning Report. And I don't know what was happening to your email system, but I'm getting a little suspicious.
Oh yeah.
I'm getting a little suspicious.
Yeah.
Any,
Yeah, we've had to like take on and off, move on and off of platforms before. It's not easy.
Oh, I understand. I understand. But again, thank you ever so much. I appreciate it so much. You've given us such great information, and now we can continue the push back to some sort of sanity, because that's what needs to happen.
Exactly.
And I appreciate you, and I appreciate what people for ethical
Partners for
care.
Ethical Care. Yeah.
See, I can do that. Part for ethical care. I can say that. Transition justice, not this morning, but what you guys are doing, and we're going to try to get as much help to you as we possibly can. Again, thank
Thank you
you
so
ever so
much.
much for spending time with us. All right, we're going to continue right after these messages.
There's this huge placebo effect, and when people have these different mental illnesses, like, we don't really know a lot of time how to solve them. But the thing is, the power of belief works really well. And yeah, transition. Um, there's like this whole gender euphoria thing with testosterone. It is very euphoric. I think, and this is the tricky thing, and I think that's why we're gathered here, is that we don't really hear the downsides of transition, right? We only hear about, oh, this is this euphoric thing that's going to be life-changing, affirming it's going to be this person's real authentic self, and it makes us all good people for affirming, these trans kids, because, we have to save them from themselves, from suicide. I don't know, I think just sharing stories of people who have gone through transition, who were or maybe still identify as trans, but found, hey, like, there are some issues with this, and there are other ways we can deal with this, whether that's recognizing there's maybe autism, maybe there's internalized homophobia, there's other kinds of traumas. I think just people being more aware that there's this other side of transition that isn't the rosy side of transition.
Prisha Mosley, a detransitioned woman who began taking testosterone at just 17 years old, is now suing the doctors who enabled her transition. Prisha was young, confused, and battling mental health problems when clinicians fast-tracked her into transgender care for profit, and what she really needed was therapy. Sadly, the treatments left her with irreversible effects, and she will not be able to breastfeed and may be infertile. Prisha is one of many detransitioners who are taking legal action against their medical providers in lawsuits that could prove pivotal in America's heated debate about transgender rights and medical procedures, especially those on children. Her doctors are accused of various fraud charges, civil conspiracy, medical malpractice, negligent infliction of emotional distress, and unfair and deceptive trade practices. A recent survey of 1,000 adults across the United States found that Americans were largely against quote-unquote gender-affirming procedures for children, with some 61% rejecting giving puberty blockers to 12-year-olds, and only 21% saying it was acceptable. They also deemed cross-sex hormones and breast surgeries unacceptable by similar margins. Prisha has started a GoFundMe to help raise funds for breast reconstruction to help her feel more comfortable in her body. Please consider donating. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Shape. I started identifying as transgender at 22 while still in college. Before that, I was just a feminine gay man. Being asked about my pronouns led me to research transgender ideology, and pretty quickly I got convinced that I was transgender woman. I was able to get hormones relatively easily through Fenway Health and was only on them for a year before receiving facial feminization and breast augmentation surgeries at 23. Taking hormones actually worsened my mental health, but therapists thought that it was because I was stuck in a wrong body. They cleared me for sex reassignment surgery by diagnosing me with gender identity disorder. Immediately after SRS, I was super excited to start a new life. I was happy for a few months while recovering. However, soon I realized that my new part wasn't what doctors promised me. My new vagina started constricting despite rigorous dilation, which resulted in me developing vaginal stenosis. This left me unable to have penetrative sex, which adversely impacted my mental health. I also lost my sex drive, my motivation to achieve anything, and became brain fogged and lethargic. I had multiple unsuccessful revisions attempting to get a few inches of neovaginal tunnel. I even had colon vaginoplasty. The last revision was at the University of Miami by Dr. Cristobal Salgado in 2018, and it left me with a colorectal fistula. I've been all over the country trying to seek help, but I have received none. Earlier this year, after hitting rock bottom with my depression, I reached out to a new therapist. This therapist helped me realize that I have complex PTSD from a traumatic childhood, and also pointed out that I have body dysmorphia, OCD, borderline personality, and bipolar disorders. I also realized I had internalized homophobia. I realize now that medical transition was sold to me as a hardware fix for software issues. A few months ago, I started detransitioning by taking testosterone. However, it is traumatic to be on testosterone without having functional genitals. Moreover, my back hurts every day due to osteoporosis and scoliosis that I developed post-SRS. I'm now dependent on synthetic hormones for life. I traded my perfectly healthy genitals for an artificial 1-inch tunnel that is sexually non-functional. I realize that I'm never getting back a functional penis, and full detransition is not really possible in my case. I feel stuck in surgically created body. I believe nobody under 18 should be allowed to medically transition. Sex reassignment surgery should only be allowed in very rare cases after a full psych evaluations. Patients should be made aware that what they're really getting is a cosmetic surgery, and it's a general approximation surgery that does not change biological sex. Thank you.
If you would like to help Shape and other detransitioners hold their providers accountable in a court of law, please consider contributing to their legal expenses. You can do so by visiting www.transitionjustice.org. Thank you.
Wow. Incredible interview. Thank you so much, Martha, from transitionjustice.org. Please get off the sideline. What you can do is you can help. You can send a few dollars to help some of these people who have been injured by the industry. The same industry that wants to lock you down, the same industry that wants to keep you on medication for the rest of your life. It's the same industry. You can help these folks who have been injured by this industry and by attorneys and by advocates. Send in a few dollars. Transitionjustice.org. Let's see if we can push back about what I think is probably the greatest danger of that it is an existential threat to our culture and our way of life. It's the biggest thing we got going right now. And that's why I got to push back on it hard. Even if you seem like a terrible person for doing so, you're not. All right. I tell you, I've been telling you guys for a long time that my governor is my dude. He's just my dude. So wrapped around all of the nonsense concerning the state curriculum on African American history, here we go again. My state, Florida, could be among the first to accept a new standardized test that is popular amongst, I don't know, Christians, conservatives, for its public universities. The latest move, as Governor DeSantis continues his battle to bat educational organizations over instructional material. There it is, right there. There it is. You know, these people have maintained that this isn't a struggle, that the educational organizations should be able to do whatever they want, which is why for a number of years, children come home after you send them to a Norman State University, come home at Thanksgiving, put their big feet under your dining room table at Thanksgiving. Their first Thanksgiving, they have been at Norman State University, I don't know, 2 months. And now they're telling you that their professor says that you and your hard work are part of the problem, are why the country is the way it is. That you are a misogynist, Dad. You are a racist, Mom, and that you and a mom who decided to stay home because your husband and you decided that you would stay home and raise your children, that you are being oppressed. This is the same children. And that every semester you write the check and you're supposed to just shut up and write the check. So this has always been a concern. This has been a concern for years and years and years. The Florida Board of Governors, with support of the DeSantis administration, is set to vote at its August meeting on whether to approve the classic learning test scores for admission in addition to SAT and ACT scores. That's important because context, truth, facts, context, nuance, details, all important. The CLT would be something that the school could use in addition to SAT and ACT scores. So the narrative is going to be, and I'm going to tell you this because you're going to hear this. You're going to hear this today. You're going to hear this weekend, that Florida's getting rid of the ACT and ACT as admission and only taking this Christian test to get in universities. And this is not true. It's not true. Schools will get to consider, this other test, this CLT, the classic learning test. Now, the classic learning test started in 2015. It is favored among conservative groups, yes, and Christian groups as an alternative to tests like the SAT and the ACT, which a lot of people know that they promote a progressive agenda. It's interesting, but this is going to be really good because Black advocates have been saying for years that the SAT is racially biased. For years, right? They have railed against the SAT and ACT for years. But they're going to come out, but they're going to be forced to come out in full support of the College Board at this point because politics. You watch what I'm saying. I'm not wrong. I may be crazy, but I ain't wrong. The CLT emphasizes teaching the humanities, morality, classic literature, and has been implemented in over 200 predominantly private universities. if accepted, it could be a significant win for DeSantis, who has launched a campaign against Florida's education system. No, this article is from MS. No, he hasn't. He has basically mentioned and pushed back some of the things that a lot of folks have been saying for years and years and years. But we've been told to shut up. We've been told to say, "Oh, well, you're not a university professor. You know what you're talking about. You're not a doctor. You're not an epidemiologist." Blah, blah, blah. So we should just be quiet, right? Shut up and write the check. And frankly, that's all. First of all, that's all that Trump did, and this is all that DeSantis is doing. DeSantis recently engaged in a lengthy battle with a college board that administers the ACT and the ACT over the layout of the AP African American History course. It was the AP version of the American History course. People are very, very critical of it. And they should be. First of all, it's part of his gig. And it's part of the educational department's gig to look at these curriculums that they buy. Stop it. That they buy. The AP, the College Board is just not providing these curriculums out of the goodness of their heart because they care about the nation and the children. They are selling these curriculums to the states. And it's like you get a meal and they bring it to you and you're like, what the hell is this? What's this? This is supposed to be chicken. I think it's chicken, but it's got feathers on it. We're eating feathers now? I don't think so. Take this back. What's happening? That's what this is. It isn't that you don't want to teach, that nobody wanted to teach correct African American history. It is that this AP African American history was all full of 1619 crap, and they were like, do better, do better. The organization updated its African American history framework in response to conservative accusations, but then announced in April it would revise the course again because they're just trying to sell it. They got pushed back from the left because they caved to DeSantis, because Florida is a huge market for them. Florida is a humongous market for them. Humongous. As is California. So they decided to update it so they could sell it. I don't know why people don't get this. So following the AP battle, the state accelerated its implementation in classical education and the CLT. DeSantis signed a bill this year that opened a college scholarship program to accept CLT scores as well as ACT and SAT scores. And there are already scholarships, Florida scholarships, that you can find in the Florida statutes for all sorts of things. I think they still have the one for being redhead. If you're a redhead, you can apply for a scholarship. For kids who get certain scores in the ACT and SAT. And now there's a possibility to get a scholarship depending on your score for the classic learning test, the CLT. Jeremy Tate, who's the founder of the CLT, told NBC News what's happening in Florida is the next step to a broader movement among education groups that are frustrated with the level of progressive influences in programs. It's certainly a lot bigger than the test itself, Tate said. I think everybody knows there's something deeply, deeply wrong in mainstream education right now. And that's true. And it's been wrong for a long, long time. The CLT is designed to eschew Common Core curriculum. And everybody knew what that was. And intentionally favors people like Aristotle, Benjamin Franklin, and Jane Austen, over 20th century progressive authors, Tate said. The College Board released an analysis. Now, what did I just tell you about the College Board? They're selling this curriculum, right? They're selling all the AP stuff. You have to pay money to take the ACT and SAT. So they've decided to release an analysis of the CLT's methodology and rigor. You know, it's like McDonald's doing a study to see how good Burger King is. So of course they said it wasn't very good. You got to friggin' be kidding me. Anyway, I got to get out of here and make room for somebody else. Listen, transitionjustice.org, transitionjustice.org, help out. It is important that we all speak up, speak out, and push back. My name is Willie Lawson. This has been the Morning Report. The Morning Report is a production of fightbackmedia.com, 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 and fightbackmediatv.com. Until we see you again, go out there and learn something, love somebody, and for goodness sakes, y'all take care of yourself. We will see you when we see you. Bye-bye now.